Good evening, everyone. No, I'm not Shelley Graff. Shelley, they're doing their final training in the 4-year teacher training program that Shelley's been part of, sponsored or overseen by the senior teachers at the Insight Meditation Society in Massachusetts. And so Shelley's busy this week with her cohort of 20 or so other people in the program, and we'll graduate in May. If you didn't know that about Shelley, we're really proud, I guess, and inspired and grateful that Shelley's able to be part of that program. So I'm here tonight and really looking forward to being with everyone and sitting together and having a Dharma discussion afterward. And then just maybe a little setup. I thought it might be nice for us to explore how from our own practice, we understand the taste of freedom, the taste of the practice, the flavor that in a way guides us forward, inspires us, gives us energy or confidence. And some of you might know in some of the suttas, the Buddha talks about the taste of freedom, a very unforgettable taste. And so I thought we could reflect together, like what has our experience actually been as we've done some practice? What flavor do we actually trust that guides us? Almost like we're homing in on something that is trustworthy. Well, what is that something that we're homing in on that we trust, that the heart trusts? But let's first just do some practice together. So do whatever you can to settle the posture. So you have some sense of being settled, relatively comfortable, and sitting in a way that supports brightness in the heart and mind, curiosity, clarity. So find a balance between the comfort and the alertness. And it's going to look different for each of us, so just do the best you can. And as we explore the taste of freedom, one way to explore this taste of freedom right now is just to explore the release, the good feeling of simplicity, and to notice any stress that is there when your experience gets entangled or complicated. So even now, sitting with a computer or phone in front of us, let's see how simple things can be. So simple that we're not even imposing some idea that I'm here and I'm supposed to be meditating. Instead, we're just a group of people, each of us, exploring how simple this experience can be, sitting comfortably in a way that supports alertness, present moment awareness, and just valuing keeping things really simple. Is there some pleasure, some inner pleasure in things being really uncomplicated and simple? As we just are aware of what's here. For example, the sensations of the body sitting. And even though there may be thoughts and emotions coming and going, maybe that's okay, and all of those thoughts and emotions can simply be allowed to come and go without feeling obliged to judge the thoughts or have an opinion about the thoughts that are coming and going. Almost like someone just left a radio on and just allowing it to be in the background, including any thoughts about our practice, any doubts. Maybe right now I don't need to do anything about the thoughts, about the movement of emotion, about the movement of sound and sensation and sight. Maybe it's okay right now for all of us just to be exploring the inner pleasure of letting things be really simple. So on our own, now with some silence, just continue to contemplate the pleasure of simplicity. How simple can the heart allow things to be right now? So let this be a very direct exploration. How can we explore the experience of simplicity? So you'll notice some moments start to get really complicated, entangled, and then other times things naturally simplify. So we're just observing this movement between entanglement and simplicity, getting the lay of the land, and learning how to gravitate towards more simple ways of being in the moment. And noticing the stress that's there when the body and mind feels entangled or in the middle of a struggle. What understanding, what way of relating supports everything settling and becoming more simple? And what ways of relating, what ways of being cause things to become complicated and entangled and tight? Does training with a specific meditation anchor help? Or does it just become another complication, another entanglement, another thing to judge myself by? Whenever we notice that the mind is entangled, that things are complicated, and there's some tightness in the body and mind, we don't need to try to get back to simplicity. It's more about holding the complexity and the entanglement with a lot of compassion and stable awareness. And the complexity, the tension, the entanglement unwinds, dissolves by itself. Things move in the direction of simplicity, and the heart experiences the release, going from entanglement to simplicity. And be curious about sustaining a very simple way of being. Maybe the whole path is less about doing and more about trusting. But this is for each of us to uncover what supports this natural settling, this movement towards simplicity, and the healing that that allows. And for the last couple minutes, just to help sharpen or clarify this reflection on simplicity, could just have that sense of putting down the load, letting things be, and even more provocatively, just allowing everything to die, to cease, to end. How nice it is just to let things naturally cease, any drama, any I should do this, I should have done that. Just allowing all of these shoulds to have a natural death in this moment. In this moment, nothing, no self-centered drama needs to be picked up, but instead everything has permission to end, to cease, to die. So it's just a reflection to have a clearer, more of a felt sense of how simple things can become. So just for another minute or two. So we're not making anything cease. We're just noticing that thoughts and dramas and sensations and sounds, that everything does cease. And that there's a peaceful ease with that recognition, maybe the flavor of simplicity. So take a little time and stretch or move whatever you need to do. So I thought tonight, as we go through this program, I'll raise some questions, make a few points, and then check in, see what people's responses are, and then maybe I'll say a little bit more, and then again I'll pose a question or something for us all to reflect on, see if some folks have some comments. And you might have noticed Gabe Keller-Flores, our office manager and one of Common Ground's teachers, is here tonight, and we're exploring having our Zoom meeting directly live streamed in real time. So for that reason, I've spotlighted myself, but on your screen, if you'd rather have the gallery view, you can, most of you probably know how to, in the upper right, change your view from just seeing me to seeing the whole crowd. So you can make that change if you want. So maybe the first thing for us just to explore together, you might have heard this quote from the Buddha, and this is just kind of a rough paraphrase, but that this path of awakening, has a particular taste the taste of freedom. And that it is the knowing of that taste or the remembering of that taste that really helps to guide the path, how we navigate our path, our life. So here we are, a bunch of folks who have been walking the path. And what is our experience of this taste of freedom? And I just, as you experience, I suggested that we keep in mind or contemplate the direct experience of simplicity during the sit. So maybe that awoke in you or illuminated, oh yeah, this is the taste that I've learned to trust, not just in sitting meditation, but just generally in my life. This taste of like a movement in the direction of settling or simplicity. Another way that it's talked about in the tradition is that joy of renunciation, which is kind of a provocative phrase for a lot of us, the joy of renunciation, the ease of renunciation, the freedom. Because to a large degree, it seems like I'd feel more safe, more free, more satisfied if I had what I want. The safety I want, the love that I want, the knowledge that I want. And I collected all of those things, and then I could let go of all my wanting because I'd have everything. Some of you might have been there when I gave my talk on Sunday morning, but I shared this passage from Venerable Gotami. She was a Buddhist nun at the time of the Buddha. In fact, the first ordained nun at the time of the Buddha, and also was the aunt of the Buddha and raised the Buddha because the Buddha's mother died at childbirth. And so Mahapajapati, but in this discourse, she's referred to as with her family name, Gotami. Like Gotama is the family name because it's masculine for the Buddha, and then feminine equivalent is Gotami. So it's this discussion or this interaction between Gotami and the Buddha. And Gotami had gone up to the Buddha and said, could you give me sort of an overview of the path in brief so that, as I'm hearing a lot of practices and teachings from different people, I'll have this sort of overview from you and I'll know what is the path, what is the training, and what isn't the path and training. And so the Buddha gave her the instruction, and it's so cool to be able to reflect on it tonight. So I'll share this and then I'll see what other folks have to say. But the basic response the Buddha said that when you know from your own direct experience, it's something, being the way you're relating, the way you're showing up, your experience is this, that's not the path. But if it's this other number of qualities, then you can be confident. You can categorically know this is the way, this is the training. So here are the division between what is definitely not the path and training and what absolutely is the path and training. Passion or dispassion, right? So anything passion, it's a funny word. We tend to think people who have a lot of passion are like enlivened and really in their life in a wholesome way. But actually the word passion means suffering, as in the passion of Christ, right? The term used at that time before the crucifixion. I remember raised as a Catholic, right? So that kind of contraction of attachment versus the release of dispassion, or being fettered, not the way, being unfettered. Living in a way that's all about accumulation versus living in a way that's all about shedding. Now, you don't have to agree with this. We're just kind of hearing it and seeing how it lines up with our own direct experience in life. Self-aggrandizement, all about me, versus modesty, humility. It's interesting, modesty sort of can have just the way the word is used recently in the last number of decades because it almost always now implies that somebody has an affect, like, oh, I'm not gonna show up in the moment because I'm modest. But it really means sort of having I think what the Buddha is pointing to is having a realistic understanding. So when we're modest, it means that we understand, like, whatever good qualities that people are recognizing in me, they're not really me. Those good qualities, whatever they might be, arose because of causes and conditions. Like, I was able to get a pretty good education. Well, that's not really me, but people might recognize something in one of us, or somebody might be particularly beautiful or particularly strong or particularly clever or whatever it might be. But that's, so modesty really means not so much having a negative view of ourselves. It's actually avoiding both the negative and the positive and just having a realistic view. Like, whatever good shows up in my life is just a natural arising of causes and conditions. So the humility, modesty, these words in a Buddhist context, it's not an affect or a stance. It's just a realistic understanding. And of course, it's the same with whatever our weaknesses might be. That's also not personal and not something to use to beat ourselves up or to maintain a self-hatred, because, well, yeah, that's how it is. And it's not my fault that I'm not good at that or that I'm capable of making those kinds of mistakes. It is the natural unfolding. I have to take responsibility for my strengths and weaknesses, but I don't need to kind of build a sense of self around them. And he has more here. Discontent versus contentment. Entanglement versus being secluded from entanglements. Or a word I like instead of secluded, because secluded always seems to have this, I'm disconnected from life, so I don't really have any entanglements. But immunity from entanglement, meaning I might be in the realm where there are a lot of hooks, but I'm not taking a hold of any of the hooks, right? I'm not grabbing onto anything, even though the moment is complex. There are a lot of triggers. I'm feeling the impact of the triggers that are around me, but I know what's going on. I'm seeing this, it's triggering these emotions, all this is moving, but I'm not taking the bait. So entanglement, seclusion from entanglement, lazy, aroused persistence, being burdened, being unburdened. So if we know, like if we're hearing a teaching or living in a way that is mostly flavored with dispassion, being unfettered, shedding humility or modesty, contentedness, seclusion from entanglement, aroused persistence, being unburdened, you may categorically hold, this is the path, this is the training. On the other hand, if your way of being, your way of relating, what's going on in the heart and mind is all about passion, being fettered, accumulating, self-aggrandizement, discontent, entanglement, laziness, and being burdened, then you can categorically hold, this is not the way, this is not the training. So let's just take some time and check in with each other. And you could just, let's see, there are 30 of us. Maybe it's okay for people just to unmute themselves with this number of folks, but just be on the lookout for somebody beginning to speak at the same time. It's nice, if you don't mind, just to introduce yourself. And even though we're live streaming this, because I'm spotlighted, your face won't show up. Your voice will show up, but your face won't show up on the live stream and on the recording. So your privacy will be protected in that way. Yeah, but just your own experience. Like, how have you discovered or felt what you feel is some flavor of freedom that kind of helps you navigate your spiritual life and more just generally your whole life. So you feel like you're planting seeds that are going to bear positive fruit, more space, more freedom, more love, etc. Yeah, anybody want to start off? And feel free also to ask questions too. Colleen, I see you're unmuted. Did you want to begin?
Thank you very much. This is Colleen. I go by she and her pronouns. Um, I like this talk a lot. Thank you for the talk. I'm wondering, it's kind of a technical question, please. Is this anything similar to the 10 paramis that I've heard about? Is this different? Um, and like how does it and how does it work into our daily lives?
Yeah. So for people who don't know, the paramis are these beautiful qualities of the heart. And they're really, like in the tradition, the paramis are specifically pointing to qualities of the mind that are supportive of what we might call ordinary happiness. Even though they sound very spiritual, they deliver, like just in an ordinary way, well-being. And they're things like generosity and this capacity to restrain ourselves from harming other beings when we are aware that, like, how we might speak or act could cause harm. We have that strength of restraint, like, no, I'm not going to do that. I don't want to possibly harm someone. And wisdom and energy and resoluteness and equanimity and kindness, patience. Renunciation is also one of the paramis. And another list of the paramis is very short. It's just dana, sila, bhavana. Those are, some of you maybe were on the year-end retreat, and Shelley Graff and Win Fricke and Stacy McClendon and we talked about these three bases of meritorious action, but they're kind of the core paramis of like what actually sets in motion well-being. You want to be happy just on an ordinary level. Well, go from stinginess to living, relating in a more generous way. Go from being negligent in terms of how we might be causing harm to very attuned to how we might be involved in causing harm. Go from not thinking I need to train my mind to really getting interested, like, how can I train my heart and mind to be present in a stable way? So those are the paramis. So, but a lot of these lists, Colleen, kind of map onto other lists, even though they're distinct lists. So this list here isn't really the paramis, but it's definitely an overlap of a lot of those beautiful qualities of heart. But it's really, this list in particular goes to the question that I'm kind of generally posing for us about the taste of freedom. Because the taste of freedom is a specific kind of pleasure. Like there's the pleasure of metta, loving kindness. There's the pleasure of being able to contribute and really support somebody. That's deeply satisfying, when we're generous in just the right way, speaking words that are really supportive to someone. We're not trying to get anything out of it. We just are just showing up for that person. And that's a really nice feeling. So this is more the level of the parami. But these qualities that I just shared from that sutta with Gautami talking to the Buddha, it's really different ways about talking about the taste of freedom, which is related to the joy of renunciation. And this is a more subtle teaching from the Buddha, where he's saying, even when you got your life all together and you're living in a very wholesome way, and the world is reflecting back to you your wholesomeness, everybody loves you because you're generous, because you're kind, because you're balanced, because you're this, because you're that, still there's a deeper happiness than that ordinary happiness of well-being, living in harmony, living in a generous way. There's an even more profound happiness. And you know, this is where the word nibbana or nirvana comes in. But it's really this particular taste of renunciation, of letting go, of putting down. You know, at the end of the set, I just invited us to explore the taste of cessation, of letting everything go, being willing to die, allowing everything to end. Doesn't mean things aren't going to arise, but we're really keying in, tuning in to the dropping the load. And that's really what this list is more about. Thanks for the comment and question, Colleen. Who'd like to go next? Other experiences you'd like to share with the group? What's coming to mind? Or questions, of course.
Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Okay.
Amber.
I was just thinking, it made me think of, and I can't remember who said it, the idea of my cup is already broken.
Ajahn Chah.
Thank you. And the sense of freedom you kind of have when you accept the idea that everything changes or everything passes, and then you don't have to cling and you don't have to hold on. If you have a favorite cup and you know that it's already broken, you don't have the fear of breaking it anymore or the fear of losing it. And it's kind of freeing in a almost paradoxical way, I guess, to know that it's already broken.
Yeah, no, that's a powerful sharing. Die before you die, that's a common phrase in Buddha, the sort of Buddhist tradition. And a funnier note, some of you my age will remember, I think I was in high school when I saw Harold and Maude. Some of you remember that movie. And a younger man falls in love with an older woman and eventually gives her a ring. I forget if it's an engagement ring or just a ring. But anyway, she looks at it, very appreciative, really letting it land. And then she throws it into the lake. I'll always know where it will be. And there's something about that. Those of you with kids, like really seeing that the child, in a way, time is a construct. So in a way, whatever you have, whatever that relationship is where that child is dependent on you and you're really the mother or the father, that's already broken, like the mug or the cup that Amber's mentioning. That child's already going to be an adult, probably. This life is already destined to end. And it really changes. This is a great line from Thich Nhat Hanh where he says, you know, when you're having an argument with your honey, just imagine them 300 years from now when there will be dust mostly, the bones, the body. It's really hard when we are incorporating that it's already broken, it's already ended. That's part of the scene. You don't have something without the end of that something. Thanks, Amber. Other thoughts?
Hi, everybody.
Hi. Go ahead. Is this Marianne?
It is.
Yeah. You just go ahead and introduce yourself.
My name is Marianne, and I have been an ardent follower at Common Ground for about 1 year. So I'm learning quite a great deal. And I have to say that this morning, the notion of putting down the load was really crystallized for me with my sister, who is, let's say, of a different political persuasion. And we're very, very close. She lives in California. We're very close. We talk often. But about a week ago, we decided that we cannot speak of politics anymore between us, or we will we will completely ruin our relationship. And so we agreed that whoever brought it into the conversation from that point on would have to pay the other person $100. And she, in theory, now owes me about $10,000. And I have kept to my promise to not bring that up. And this morning was very difficult because watching the impeachment proceedings, I nearly had to sit on my hands to keep from texting her back because her comments were so outrageous and so just irrational and so irrational that I really do worry about her. But I felt this huge sense of ease, and it was really a profound sense of I don't have to go there with her, and I won't. And it took a while to really get into it because I sort of continued to make up comments or make up retorts to her in my mind, but then I just let them go and said, nope, not going to do that. No, not going to say that. Not going to text that. And finally, after about 5 times, I just said, I'm not even going to let this bother me anymore. I'm not going to do it. And that's the end of it. And it was it really was crystallized the notion of putting down the load in my mind in a big way, and in a way that, as you say, Mark, I doubt I'll ever forget the taste of that. I'm pretty sure I won't.
That's a really powerful sharing, Marianne. Yeah, and it corresponds to one of the suttas. I forget exactly the context, but people were wanting to draw the Buddha into an argument. And, he said something like, the world may have quarrels with me, but I don't have quarrels with the world. Now, it's easy for us to misunderstand that, and this, you may have more to say about this, Marianne, but because there may be some situations where being silent isn't really the appropriate response. So could we, like, if we had particular responsibilities where we had to speak or it was appropriate for us to speak, maybe we could even speak, but maintain that feeling you had this morning of not having to pick up the drama, not having to be in that binary good versus bad, who's right kind of struggle, but still be engaged with responsibilities, still be a good citizen or whatever, still vote, still advocate and do whatever is needed to promote justice in the world for those who maybe are being mistreated, but not feel in conflict with people who think we're wrong. And that's such an interesting thing. And I think one of the things that fuels the divisiveness in our country generally is wherever we might be politically, it's the demonization of the other side, as opposed to just doing what's useful politically, socially. So not holding back if something needs to be done to, if we can, if it's possible, to sort of set good in motion. But why do we need to demonize the other side? And where I see this a lot, just coming myself from a progressive point of view, liberal point of view, is how acceptable humor, mainstream humor, comedy is in demonizing and really belittling and being mean-spirited. But in the context of it's acceptable, well, that's a little like, why would that be acceptable? Well, because we've collectively, each of us in our own political camp, have demonized the other side. So within our camp, we've already thrown the people out of our heart. So because they're not people anymore, not in our heart anymore, we can say whatever we want about them. And I think that's just eats away at everything that is of value. Any other thoughts, Marianne, before we move on?
I know for certain that my sister is not a person I would be able to even, in order to keep my integrity with her, I would need to say something. We're way past that mark, because any further conversation about this will only be deeply damaging to her, not me, because I'm blessed with a greater worldview and I'm lucky enough that I've had enough experience with living in the world that I can tolerate it. It doesn't destabilize me, but with her it does, and therefore I don't need to do that with her.
Yeah.
It's a choice. I really have made it. Know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. And speech is like what to say and what not to say is a pragmatic thing. Like we don't just speak the truth, we speak the truth when it's helpful to speak the truth. Doesn't mean that we lie, but sometimes like truth needs to be spoken in the right way at the right time. So it actually plants seeds of healing and well-being and justice and all the good things that we want in the world. Because truth can be used, we can say something that in a sense is true, but we're really saying it to hurt the other person or embarrass the other person or something like that, or belittle. Yeah, thanks, Marianne. Really
Thank you.
powerful sharing. Who'd like to go next?
I could say something about sort of what you were just on, or just sort of curiosity in terms of when the truth is useful or helpful to speak. And there's sort of this concept of truth to power and things like that. I'm wondering if there's a when one is suggesting that the paradigm that exists can't work, or like as I like to say, the sand in the foundation of our big country is faulty, and like the foundation needs to come out. It's like it's sort of a radical refiguring, reconsidering of how to have an opposition that isn't dichotomous, or how to have an aid that isn't just a certain kind of way from the government or whatever. Just that, like a really an imaginative sort of open space for a new paradigm to come up with different values. And I'm just wondering if that's because it's such a hard thing for people to like think that something can come open in the same way that a self seems like a solid self. Those paradigms seem like they're like really real things, or money seems like a real thing, and they're all sort of decisions and like gloms that we've made and agreed upon, social contracts basically. And so I'm just wondering if is there a way to sort of like have the usefulness of like have those ideas without the abrasiveness, or like probably just dead end of like trying to talk to people about something that like is not where their thinking is, or where they kind of know to go at this point.
Yeah, no, it's a good question, Jessica. And I think, when the most important thing is we keep bringing it back to our own mind and heart, and not postponing our freedom. Like, let's say the world is sinking, like you said, the foundation is really off, and as long as the foundation is off, there are going to be serious problems and injustice. So let's just say that's an accurate analysis of the situation at hand here. And but in a way, we have to take responsibility, like for being free where we are right now in this imperfect world, so that our analysis and our engagement isn't coming from our own panic and our own fear, self-survival, right? Because that's the predicament we're in. That may be what your analysis is analyzing, is that because we've all of our survival instincts have been triggered, and we're basically at war with each other, whether it's the elites against the poor, or the right against the left, or male against female, or white against non-white, or whatever it might be, these power struggles that exist, that are very real and a cause for so much suffering. And so I think the way out is for us to take responsibility. How do I, in my own life right now, without waiting for social political change, how do I step out of that? How do I create a foundation that is trustworthy, so that we're basically committing to modeling the freedom we sense might be possible for the society, for the community? We start modeling it right in our own life, and then in concentric circles in some of our relationships with dear ones. Because if it really works, then the modeling is going to be a powerful force for change, I think. Because otherwise we just get fixated on, even if we're really skillful, that you're in the way of progress, basically. And
Yeah.
you're the cancer we got to get rid of.
Yeah, well, and also I remember years ago hearing you say something about not getting mixed up in this and that about anything really, and how just sort of those conditions are always something that we could be working with to be okay with, and we don't have to be in that space of the this and that, which was always very useful for me to remember. Yeah, I think it applies here. I think, yeah.
And there are really two different paths, just to kind of be grossly simplistic, that are wholesome, deeply wholesome. One path is to commit all of our life energy to addressing those who are suffering. So the path of like activism, really wanting to directly put my energy in uprooting injustice, things like that. And the other path is, it's kind of, I mean, possibly, I think people can argue this, but from my point of view, from a bigger perspective, like of really understanding how freedom, the deep release of my heart, will be a bigger contribution than me committing myself to social change. Now, I'm just sort of simplifying like one or the other. So even if we take the spiritual route, doesn't mean we're not engaged in activism. It just means that this is the lens through which we do our activism and we make our food. It's the lens we do everything, as opposed to justice or making the world a better place. And, you know, I think when we think about the stories from Buddhism as myth in a wholesome sense, then maybe some of you know, but at the time of the Buddha's birth, the king, his father, you know, not really a king. I think more scholars think now he was just sort of like, they had these clans, these areas that were run by sort of the main family. And the Buddha's father, was sort of the head of the family that ran this local community. So the chieftain or something like that. But anyway, he consulted an astrologer, and the astrologer said about the Buddha, you know, he's either going to be a world-turning ruler or he's going to be an awakened one. And when we hear that story, we think like, oh, that would be bad to be a world-turning ruler. But really what he's saying is like, either he's going to do good one of two ways. He's either going to be this benevolent dictator and really lead from this really benevolent place of justice, or he's going to put all his energy into spiritual awakening. And I think that when we're balanced, we feel both tugs. We should feel both tugs. And a lot of it will be karma, like what's already in motion in our heart. And in terms of what direction we go, both in any one moment, but just generally in our lives. Both are good things to do. We need people to run for political office. Like, what a thankless job these days. But we need people to be engaged. We need people to get in the streets sometimes. We need people to speak truth to power. and we need more people committed to awakening. That's my opinion. Other thoughts? Thanks, Jessica. Taste of freedom we're talking about. What have you learned? What have you felt, experienced in your life? That's just given a little bit about like inner intuition about what is possible in our life.
Hi, my name is Paul. I use he, him pronouns. And I think something that I've learned lightening the load recently has to do with Pancha, if I pronounce that correctly.
Papancha?
And yeah, basically something that you said during I think a guided meditation about delighting in the lack of Pancha. And sort of in conjunction with one time recently you gave a talk where you were referencing like a production company in our mind, and I could really relate to that. In other words, one of the things that I think I grasp for is to be prepared. In other words, this goes way back to, oh my gosh, those people in that car, they're going to drive by and say something about me. So I need to be ready for that, whatever that means. And actually, I don't think it's possible to be ready for that. But so those two things in conjunction, along with labeling thoughts as nature and condition, not personal, not reflecting my heart's desire, that mental, that conceptual proliferation has ceased or diminished. And it's so helpful to notice the lack of that. And I guess the other piece is sort of, you said at one point, like, notice when there isn't desire, notice when there isn't suffering, so that anyway, those are a few ways that I feel like the load has been lightened tremendously. So thank you.
Yeah, very powerful sharing, Paul. Thank you. And, you know, even though it's a little weird, the word cessation, it's really good for us people who've been practicing for a while to just take that up. What is the Buddha pointing to with that word, nirodha, the cessation, the ending, the putting down the load? And how might that word point to something that's here and now, always in our experience? So it's not something metaphysical, but there is something about our direct subjective experience of things ending that we've been missing, we haven't really attuned to. But when we do attune to it, it has this flavor of peace. And that's really the happiness of Nibbana, is really this happiness, the peace of understanding the ending. But it doesn't somehow restrict or take away the arising of the next experience. But we really want to get to know how things end. There's something very peaceful in that, which is, it's actually surprising. People who have done more formal contemplation of death, it's actually very peaceful to contemplate the ending. But you have to check it out. Thanks again, Paul. Other thoughts people have?
Hey, this is Jason. He, his pronouns. maybe just a lighter response to this prompt. This is my season for an art I enjoy. I've been snow sculpting, and it's been a lot of front yard practice lately, and I've just really noticed a real joy in watching how these sculptures melt and sag and eventually break. Like how it's this sort of compressed, it's a shorter version of watching something die, that I really enjoyed creating too, and put a lot of myself into and then let go. So it's a microcosm of this that I have. I think of my practice when doing it and observing that. As far as bringing that to my practice, I think I'm still, to my sitting practice, I think I am still working on that. So that's all. Thanks.
Do you take photographs of that dissolution?
I do. And I could sort of could wax on about that whole side of it, right? Like, of course, the whole side of the art is, well, you do capture it. It can live forever in pictures. So how much is it for the Instagram shot, etc.?
Well, but part of it can just be generosity. Like people might learn something, sharing it, just like having a Dharma discussion too. We could all stay quiet, but we wouldn't learn as much of people sticking their necks out and sharing what they have to share. The reason I asked, Jason, is you could put in the chat, like if you have an online place where people can see the photographs, you can just post it if you want in the chat so other people can check out the dissolution of your snow sculptures.
Okay. Sure can.
Yeah, that'd be great. I'd like to see.
And I've started to hear more from neighbors when I'm out there, like they are looking for the next iteration. So it is bringing joy too, which is part of the goal.
Yeah.
And it's like a flower arrangement, right? Like part of the beauty of the preciousness is that it'll go away.
And imagine if, we have culturally a lot of ceremonies and rituals for the births, the beginning of a marriage. We have some for endings, but imagine if every time we really highlighted, like even high school graduation, like put as much emphasis on what's ending as what's beginning. The rituals would be really, I think, more powerful. And we can do that. Nobody's stopping us from doing that. The year that's ending, all the things that ended this year, all the things that are possibly beginning as we move into the new year. Still have time to hear from a few more folks. Yeah, we're just reflecting on what our life has taught us, the flavor that we really trust, the flavor of freedom, the flavor of letting go. How has that showed up in our lives that provides some guidance for us?
Hi. My name's Megan. This is only my second time here, so I'm very new, but so my contribution is more based on, I've had the same therapist for about 4 years now, and but this topic really relates to something that I'm just starting to notice. I've lived most of my life in a lot of fear and anxiety and anger. And I'm just starting to notice moments where something that I would react to with a lot of anger or frustration, I either don't and I react differently, or I even just am present in that moment where I acknowledge that I can do something different and be different. And for me, it's been just incredibly freeing to realize that I don't have to, things that I identified with myself as being me, that I'm an angry person or I'm an anxious person, I don't have to identify with anymore. And I can change and I can be different. And, you know, stories that I've told about myself and been told for years don't have to be true. And when you talked about kind of letting go of a load or putting down the load, that kind of resonated with me of finally letting down the heaviness of stories that I've told myself and been told for years, and that I can be different. So.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Megan. I think it was Ajahn Sushito. He's a British Buddhist monk. I think it was him at least. But anyway, about, you know, instead of there being a one of me, there are just these different patterns. And he said it's a little bit like a city council where you have different people who sit on the city council, and they each of them have their own personality, strengths and weaknesses. Some might be very obnoxious, but it really depends who has the mic in the meeting. And this is the thing, we can't make ourselves have a different personality or a different group of committee members, but who we pay attention to, it's like who we empower by just awareness. Oh, yeah, there's this part of my mind. I see this a lot. You know where I see it a lot is just all the work I've been trying to do in the last number of years, now for a while, just around racism and just understanding my own whiteness and my racial conditioning. And so I'm much more honest with myself about getting triggered, as white people do, in the particular way that white people get triggered around race and privilege and being male on top of it. But I'm not afraid of that kind of racial and gender conditioning that I have. I see it so much more. And I see the sort of arrogance of it and the privilege of it and the aggrievement of it. I see all of those things that I could easily, you know, point my finger when other people are acting it out as like, oh my God. But I see it in me, but I don't give that personality pattern the microphone. I don't act it out. And I think that like you were sharing is very powerful, to realize we can't change how we've been conditioned, certainly not quickly, but we can learn to live with it. And we have to learn to live with it, and we can learn to be free by just seeing, oh yeah, that's just that pattern that got set in motion through so many different causes and conditions. And I'm so glad to see it. And I'm so glad not to give it the microphone and not to have to act it out. Or another example of this is just any of you who are in a long-term relationship. And, you know, because of what happens in long-term relationships, there are times when you hate the person, or you want to get even with the person, get revenge or whatever. And because you know each other so well, you can really hurt the other person. But even though that motivation might be there to kind of get revenge or whatever, but wisdom and awareness can see it. Oh yeah, that's just a committee member. I don't trust that committee member, and I'm certainly not going to give that committee member the microphone, right? And we don't have to be embarrassed or ashamed of all these different people who are on the committee, because it's not personal. We have time for one more sharing. If there's somebody who would like to share a little bit of what you've been learning in life.
Yes, I would. I'm Sally, she, her. And one of the ways I've noticed the freedom for me is not trying to seek something out there to bring me this happiness, you know, that it's counterculture, because we're looking, we want a beautiful house and we want the relationship and we want all of that. And I've really, really learned the hard way all of these years that that does not bring happiness. And it's when you kind of, when you've taught the Buddhist studies class about dukkha and kind of the nature of suffering or that life is unsatisfactory, and to kind of expect that. And so that's been freeing for me. It's almost counterintuitive, but that notion that, you're not going to find it out there. And if you keep looking, you won't be satisfied. And that's freeing. I find that very freeing. So I just wanted to share that.
Yeah, and it's a beautiful place to end, Sally, because it's really that turning point that you're describing is exactly, we really want to get interested in the flavor that Sally's pointing to, where our mind turns from seeking satisfaction and happiness by getting and having and holding to beginning to intuit the happiness of not needing, not being dependent on getting. Doesn't mean you don't open the fridge and get something to eat, but really getting curious about the flavor of, I may or may not open the fridge, but I feel the freedom of not needing, not being dependent on having that sense experience of eating something I like to eat. So I may get it or I may not get it, but I'm really curious and interested in keeping in mind the flavor of non-dependence, not expecting the things of the world to be something I can, build happiness on. So it's the happiness of letting go versus the happiness of accumulation or having or holding. Really nice to be together tonight. And I see that Jason did put his Instagram, in case you want to see the snow sculptures and the dissolution. I'm going to check it out. And Shelley will be back next Wednesday night, of course, and lots coming up. So check out the website about what's coming up these next few days. I know Ramesh's program will be on Saturday morning in a few weeks, and a day-long retreat at the end of the month. And Shelley and I will be leading a 2-day retreat, Friday and Saturday of President's Weekend. So right in the middle of February, Gabe will get that registration out probably within a week or so. So you can take a look at that when it comes out. And if you're not on the weekly email, you can go to the website to sign up so you get the weekly email. It's really a good way for people who feel part of the community to stay part of the community. Wishing you all a good week. May we all be safe. Feel free to say goodbye if you'd like.